and essentially thank you to the South African Institute of International Relations, who has organized for us and help us in this in organize this seminar. Because for that this seminar will be, and of course, very welcome to all the people who are in the virtual reality and they are following us in this moment. This seminar will be about the 30 years of the diplomatic relations between Poland and South Africa, because we think that in this moment we want to present you what we achieved during the two countries during this 30 years. It will be not a long seminar, but we want to present you the essential informations about our relations from distance, but also for close countries. So I will, in this moment, of course, it's my pleasure to ask Mrs. Director, Chief Executive of SAIA, Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, to have some welcoming remarks from the virtual reality.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Ambassador and invited guests. I know this was supposed to be one of our first in-person events here at SAIA, and here I am addressing you virtually. Nevertheless, good morning from Greece, actually, where apparently I'm supposed to be on holiday. But really good to be participating in this in the seminar, because we've been discussing it for some time and had hoped, obviously, to have organized this a little earlier. But global circumstances stopped us from doing that. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Institute, in particular the Polish ambassador and his colleagues, Ambassador Kantak. Also, very good to have with us a colleague from the Polish Institute of International Affairs, with which we've had engagements and relations in the past. They're also the Institute is also part of a global network of think tanks called the Council of Councils, and we've had the opportunity to exchange views in that regard. I'm probably going to kill your name, but it's Mr. Tserep, who will also be participating in the seminar, and I understand that the Chief Director from DIRCO for Central Europe, Ms. Phumzile Mazibuko, is also on her way, so looking forward to hearing from her too. I also want to recognize the Chief Whip of the Joburg City Council, Tyrell Mayers, who's also joined us in a couple of these events of ours over the course of the last few weeks, and it's good to have you here again. I'm going to be making some more substantive remarks a little later on in the seminar, but suffice to say, sort of as an introduction, that we're obviously celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations between two countries, I think, that while not great powers, are very significant players in the global scene in the context of the role that middle powers and regional powers can play. And I'm going to be reflecting a little bit on that later. We also celebrate, of course, these 30 years of diplomatic relations at a time of great global turbulence, where countries such as ours that are committed to a peaceful and cooperative world based on an effective multilateralism need to work even more closely together to ensure that we keep peace, we keep to tackling some of the biggest challenges that we face, those of preserving our planet, and so a sustainable future, the title of this of the seminar. Let me stop there. I'll be making some more substantive comments, as I said, a little later on, but really great to be joining you from Athens, and look forward to the conversations.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Director, and I give the floor to His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic in Poland in South Africa, Mr. Andrzej Kantak, for some opening remarks.
Chyba nie działa, ale może ja coś przekręciłem. Tak? It's on. Okay. Anyway, the room is not very big, so we can hear each other. Good morning, and thank you very much, Director Sidiropoulos, for the very warm welcome. As I begin my address, I would like, first of all, to express my sincere gratitude to Ms. Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, CEO at SAIA, and her team, today headed by Ms. Noima Grobeler, for organizing this conference. It is not the first time that we work together, and I don't hesitate to say it is always a great pleasure and very rewarding to us. I must confess, Elizabeth, that making my notes, I made a mistake and wrote your name as Ms. Saya Sidiropoulos. It's also a very nice name, and it shows how much how strongly your name is associated with the organization. Many thanks, many of my thanks go also to today's speakers. Ms. Phumzile Mazibuko, Chief Director for Central and Eastern Europe at DIRCO, Department of International Relations and Cooperation, for representing DIRCO today and for delivering the speech. I welcome also Mr. Sebotoma from DIRCO. Thank you very much for coming. Special thanks to Dr. Jędrzej Czerep from the Polish Institute of International Affairs in Warsaw. Dr. Czerep came from Poland especially for this conference. I greet all participants of this conference, those present here and those joining us online. A very warm welcome to all. Since our conference serves to commemorate the 3 decades of cooperation between Poland and South Africa, let me start with the very short historical overview. The first semi-official diplomatic contacts between Poland and South Africa took place in 1988. It led to an agreement on consular protection for the Polish diaspora in South Africa, which was secured at the time through the Polish embassy in Gaborone in Botswana. In 1990, an agreement was signed to establish so-called Interests Bureau in both Pretoria and Warsaw. In December 1991, diplomatic relations between both countries were formally established, and respective interest bureaus were upgraded to the rank of embassies. Going back in time, during the Second World War, between 1941 and 1946, a Polish consulate general was in operation in Pretoria, with one of the most outstanding Polish diplomats, Dr. Stanisław Łebkowski, serving as a consul general, but it was not on the level of diplomatic relations at that time. But it's a very, very important event in our history. That's why I'm coming back to that time. Consul Łebkowski, in cooperation with Jan Smuts' government, secured permission for evacuation to South Africa, Polish refugees who had been deported at the beginning of the Second War by Soviets, mainly to Siberia. Among them were 500 Polish children, most of them orphans. They were brought to Oudtshoorn in Western Cape, where they received accommodation, care, and education. In South Africa, they found their new home, warmth, and security. Some of the wartime refugees have left Africa after the war and came back to their homeland or found another place to live. Some of them, however, decided to stay here. Many became valuable members of their society, giving immeasurable contribution to the development of their adoptive homeland. We also remember and express gratitude to the servicemen of South African Air Force, the brave pilots who with extreme courage were flying from Italy over Poland to bring relief to the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. Welcome, Ms. Mazibuka. Thank you for coming. We pay tribute to them at the beginning of September every year at the Cutting Monument in Johannesburg. Poles have never forgotten the generous hospitality and help received from South Africans in those tragic moments in our history. It has created a special bond between both our countries and peoples, lasting until today. Before the fall of the apartheid, Poland had no formal relations with South Africa. We rejected the system of racial segregation and supported South African people in their fight for freedom. Poland demanded liberation of Nelson Mandela and other ANC leaders, and on the United Nations Forum, supported the actions taken against apartheid. However, we always advocated for political and democratic solutions. At the time when we established diplomatic relations, South Africa was on the path of democratic changes and close to the end of the inhuman system of apartheid. The remarkable political capabilities and profound moral convictions of Nelson Mandela made possible achieving peaceful political solutions of the internal conflicts. I must also mention the political vision of President F.W. de Klerk, who, despite being politically connected with the apartheid system, was able to understand the changing times and that building a modern, strong state on the basis of racism, terror, and repression is no longer possible. At this time, Poland, after almost half a century of communist rule, was on the way of building its democratic system and on the way of a deep economic transformation. When communism fell in 1989, it bequeathed the new democratic Poland a bankrupt economy and impoverished society. On the other hand, despite all the economic ills and social misery, it bequeathed an egalitarian, open, educated, and inclusive society. This made the post-communism economic miracle in Poland to happen. On the transition route, both our countries were compelled to transform also their foreign policy, taking into account the new global construct of the international relations and respective interests in the areas of politics, security, and economy. It is no doubt that electing Nelson Mandela as a president of the Republic of South Africa has totally changed the history of this country. So South Africa has become a moral and political leader, not only in Africa, but in the world policy. South Africa has been reinstalled to the system of international organizations, taking an active role and participating in the most important political decisions. Definitely, the status of the country had rapidly improved and became far much stronger than in the times of apartheid. After regaining sovereignty, the principal goal of Poland was to guarantee its security and to find its place in the European system. The first goal was achieved by entering NATO. From our point of view, the most effective security system in Europe. The second goal was completed with our entry to the European Union in 2004. On some occasions, Poland and South Africa might have had different interests or different perceptions of the international reality. This seems obvious, taking into consideration the geographical and geopolitical position and different and very complex histories. There have been various factors that have influenced our relations, but they have not been decisive as to the shape of our bilateral relations. I dare say the past 30 years have shown that our bilateral relations have been founded on a very strong political and moral basis. Firstly, the Republic of South Africa and Poland represent similar values in their international policy. The democracy and respect for human rights being the most important. It reflects both countries' historical experience and struggle for freedom, recognition, and respect. Secondly, the solidarity of Poland with the African nations in their fight against colonialism and foreign domination. And in this case, our constant support to South Africans in their fight with the inhuman system of apartheid. Poland has never had any colony, neither was involved in slavery and human trafficking. Thirdly, Poland and South Africa believe in the rights of sovereignty and self-determination and the rule of international law. Today, in the view of Russian unprovoked aggression on Ukraine, of their total disdain for the legal rules and open questioning of the independence of a neighboring country, these rules are becoming especially meaningful. Fourthly, Poland and South Africa remain active members and supporters of Organization of United Nations and of the organizations of the UN systems. Poland and South Africa consider the international organizations as an essential tool for the construction of multilateral international order. We are aware of the work of the African Union and its contribution to solving the problems of Africa, which must be solved essentially by Africans themselves. Fifth, Poland and South Africa believe in the peaceful resolution of conflicts and the diplomacy as the only rational way of the solution of problems. However, we have the notion that not in all cases does diplomacy bring solutions. If some countries show contempt for the international law and decide to use force without acknowledgement and resolution of the international organizations, the Security Council of the United Nations in particular. The solidarity of Poland and its support is designated to the country which is the victim of the attack. This explains our help and solidarity with Ukraine and our readiness to receive a few million Ukrainian refugees. The situation in Europe and the inability of the United Nations Security Council has convinced us that a deep reform of the United Nations is needed, and we share this conviction with our partners from South Africa. The Security Council has to be a mirror of the reality of the actual world. We are convinced of the necessity of a stronger representation of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. A fairer composition of the Council would help to better cope with the international problems. Sixth, Poland and South Africa, with their diverse political and economic interests, have sometimes different interpretation of several aspects of the international policy. This is very natural. However, this difference in the approach to the international relations has never provoked a political conflict between Poland and South Africa. We perfectly understand that every sovereign country has the right to determine its position and its behavior, taking into account its own interest, whilst respecting the rules of international law, democracy, and human rights. During the past 30 years of our diplomatic relations, we've never had a deep political disagreement. Our dialogue has been very fruitful and helpful in determining the rules of our policy. In all aspects, our relationship with South Africa, in a parliamentary and ministerial level in particular, is developing in a very positive manner. We are very satisfied with our relations at the level of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, including regular political consultations. The last consultations were carried out in Warsaw in August 2021 between Deputy Minister Alwin Butes and Polish Deputy Minister Paweł Jabłoński. The next meeting is scheduled for the beginning of December this year in Pretoria. Poland is expecting the official visit of the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. The visit was planned previously 2 years ago, but due to COVID pandemic, it was postponed. We hope it will materialize in 2023 and will help to consolidate and further develop our relations across a wide range of areas. Seventh, I'm not going to come to 10, it's a little bit less, so please don't bother. Seventh, South Africa is a priority economic partner for Poland on the African continent. We are engaging actively here to develop opportunities for trade and investment. In this way, we want to contribute to inclusive economic growth, which is a key national priority for both countries. The volume of our trade is already very satisfactory. Before COVID, its value exceeded $1.3 billion. We expect that in 2022, after recovery from last year, it will be even higher than in 2019 and 2020. Poland has become an attractive destination for South African investors. For example, they are #1 on the list of foreign investors in the real estate and logistics properties market in Poland. We have the South African Capital and Enterprises in our software industry, manufacturing, in the sector of commerce, and many other. Recently, very well known to everybody, Spar has entered the market and opened a chain of supermarkets in Poland. At the same time, I must admit that we are not satisfied with the value of Polish investments in South Africa. There are several Polish companies present in different sectors, from mining to software, but the participation of Poland in the economy of South Africa is too small in comparison to our potential and ambitions. We still have a lot to do on both sides. So, what will the future bring to the relations between our countries in the next decades? An objective evaluation of the present situation shows that the future of the global international relations looks bleak and uncertain. It will be necessary to increase a close cooperation of countries of goodwill and essentially attached to the international law, human rights, and democracy. Poland believes that our countries can make a difference in building security and peace in Africa and Europe. In this moment, this is one of the most important tasks for our two countries. In the economic sphere, we must explore the opportunity of cooperation in the new high technology areas. Poland has interesting offers in the field of green energy that could be explored by our South African partners. We have interesting perspectives in the new agriculture technologies and in the software industry. Poland is determined to expand its economic presence in Africa. And for us, South Africa is going to remain the most valuable partner. I would also like to stress the importance of the bilateral cooperation in the field of science and technology. In a short time, we expect to finalize the negotiations on the agreement of cooperation on science between our universities. We are happy seeing a growing number of South African students beginning their study in our university. The young people very often admit that they are very warm welcomed in Poland. Sometimes they are even victorious. Miss South Africa, Lalela Mswane, won the contest in Poland and became the Miss Supranational. So taking this opportunity again, I would like to congratulate her again. Poland, as a member of the European Union, strongly supports the development of relations between South Africa and the EU, which are based on the same values as the relations between Poland and South Africa. We have no doubt that South Africa and the European Union should cooperate closely and together contribute to the global peace and security. The past 30 years of mutual relations and friendship were good for both Poland and South Africa. I hope that the next will confirm the perspectives that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and I have the pleasure to give the floor to Madam Fowile Powmazibuko, Chief Director for Central Europe of DIRCO.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Program Director. Your Excellency, Mr. Andrzej Karpat, Ambassador of Poland to South Africa, Ms. Elizabeth Sirodopoulos, Chief Executive of the South African Institute of International Affairs. I think there's also Mr. Jereb Serep, who's the analyst for the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues from DUCO, you should have given me a lift. I just must apologize for underestimating the traffic between Pretoria and Johannesburg, and sorry to have arrived while you already were addressing us. I'd like to express our sincere gratitude to SAIA and to the Polish Embassy for extending this invitation for us to participate in this August event and to provide some opening remarks. I am here representing the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, representing our Deputy Director General, Ambassador Maud Dhlomo, who is currently traveling. Under our section, we have what we call the other part of Europe. It's a Chief Directorate, Central and Eastern Europe, Nordic and Baltic states. So it's quite a mouthful, and it's really an honor to be here to participate. As you all are aware today, we are taking stock of the progress that has been registered in our relations between South Africa and Poland, and the successful execution of our bilateral relations over a period of 30 years. The foundations of this relationship, of course, has been laid during the throes of World War II, when, of course, in 1944, the South African Air Force squadrons participated in one of the most daring operations in the history of World War. By dropping supplies at low altitude over the besieged city of Warsaw. For several weeks during the Warsaw Uprising in support of the Home Army. There is also a strong social and cultural affinity between Polish people and South Africans. And following the Second World War, hundreds of war-orphaned children were flown to South Africa in 1943 specifically to be resettled in especially prepared orphanages in the Karoo, in the town of Karoo of Oudtshoorn. We also are coming here to recall the historical solidarity that was shown by Poland to the liberation movements and to the many opportunities accorded to leaders and members of the freedom struggle to receive support and training to what would then become leaders in the respective countries, especially of our own South Africa. Poland stood firm, along with many countries, to support South Africa, to support the liberation movement in condemning the inhumanity of apartheid, which was declared a crime against humanity by the United Nations. For this reason, we shall always be forever grateful for the support and international solidarity and for Poland's particular role in this. Full diplomatic ties between South Africa and Poland were established on the 18th of December in 1999, and last year marked exactly 30 years of our bilateral relations. Since the establishment of these bilateral relations, Poland and South Africa have worked together to strengthen our relations through high-profile visits that have been undertaken between our two countries, through bilateral agreements which were signed, some are under discussion. These include agreements on higher education and science, agreements on agriculture, as well as the Joint Committee for Economic Cooperation, which we hope will expose South African companies to available opportunities for more investment and trade between our two countries. And we also want to see more Polish companies coming into South Africa to be able to do more business and exchange of opportunities and joint ventures. Poland and South Africa are now on the threshold of an important opportunity to reshape our bilateral economic landscape. We are all coming from a COVID-19 pandemic, which nobody saw or planned for, which saw the world literally on a shutdown. So we all have an opportunity to reshape the way we do business and the way we have access to each other. Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa and Poland engage in a robust relationship for mutual benefit. At the multilateral level, we are both members of the United Nations and the WTO. And within this context, we rely on mutual support of international candidatures where there are opportunities for our respective countries to represent. Furthermore, Poland is a significant member of the European Union, of which South Africa has a partnership agreement. And we believe that there's a lot more that we can do within that context. Poland is a preeminent regional leader within Central Europe. And as we all know, South Africa plays a similar role within the SADC context. So we have a lot of bilateral engagements, and also we can share a lot of information in terms of developments in our own region and how we can partner. South Africa has a structured partnership in the form of the annual political consultations at the level of our deputy ministers. Your Excellency has just mentioned the visit of His Excellency Deputy Minister Jabolowski to Pretoria later in the year. In addition to these political consultations, we also have the Joint Economic Commission on Economic Cooperation, which also is a platform for us to engage. But despite these structured mechanisms and the variety of agreements that we have not jointly reached the full potential of our relationship. And we believe that we can do so much more working together. So it is for this reason that we believe this forum will also not only highlight the past, but be a catalyst for what the future will hold. I'd like to thank both SAIA and the Polish Institute and the Polish Embassy for arranging this engagement. And I hope that the discussions that we'll have this morning will be interesting, illuminating, but will provide for the next 30 years, which will be even more successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. May I ask you, Mr. Jędrzej Czerep, to present his remarks? Panie Ambasadorze, jak pan został?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. It's both a true honor and a pleasure for me to speak about the connections between Poland and South Africa, which I believe have a potential of bringing us closer to one another. I'll help myself with slides that I hope will work. A lot was told about history by Mr. Ambassador. Let me just come up with two additional references, which probably very few people would know. And both come from my hometown of Gdańsk. Since only 4 years in Gdańsk, there is a new memorial of a South African pilot and other crew members of the Second World War era Avro Lancaster plane flying under British flag. It crashed in 1942 when on a mission to bomb the German war industry, particularly an assembly line for U-boats. And it was only in 2018 where my classmate from primary school, Michał Sawko, located the crash site in the forest, initiated excavations. And now, if I can ask technician to go to the slide, we have this little part of South African contribution to the World War II effort open on display. There we go, you can see the site. but Gdańsk is better known for being a birthplace of the trade union movement called Solidarity, which in the 1980s became a major force calling for end of dictatorship and introduction of civic freedoms, and eventually became a launching pad for the new democratic Poland. While its appeal received global attention, there was not too many instances going beyond Central and Eastern Europe with actual solidarity actions. A notable exemption was done in December '89 with a major anti-apartheid music festival called Solidarność Anti-Apartheid, being organized in the historic Gdańsk shipyard, the very same one which Germans used for producing U-boats during the Second World War, and where the iconic Polish democratic movement was born 40 years later. If I can please ask you to go to the next slide. Oh yeah. See this beautiful and highly symbolic poster of the festival. Well, it's mainly reggae that was played, so we have more of Rasta symbolics than direct South African references here. But still, you had South African artists, including the a cappella band Bambata's Children of Natal. You will see them later in a clip. Or Zimbabwe-born Zeke Manika performing among international reggae stars, and the ticket money was donated to South African trade unions. If we can go to the next one, please. The slides. Maybe let's play a short piece. I hope the sound is okay. Okay, and please next one with that will be the last clip too. That's a BBC reportage from this.
Benaya had brought his band with him to Gdansk. Reggae appeals in Poland because it's music with a message, heavy on human rights and political themes.
It has a message of freedom, and you can feel it when you dance, the music in your heart. This is the rhythm of life.
It's the harsh conditions and poverty of Poland that have drawn the support of reggae artists. Zeke Maniaka went to see the shipyards firsthand with fellow musician Linton Kwesi Johnson, who wrote a song for solidarity in even tougher times when the trade union was banned.
I think Solidarity's spirit of internationalism is great, that on the 8th anniversary of the martial law, that they should be holding an anti-apartheid show. And I'm very, very pleased that there's so many Black musicians have been invited because we too have a history of struggle and we can very much identify with the oppressed people of Poland.
For the visiting British musicians, the Lenin shipyard was the scene of the first spark of freedom that's led to the rise of popular movements all over Eastern Europe. Solidarity are using their newfound freedoms to stage their first ever political concert.
So have you noticed the artists involved felt very well the connection between Poland and South Africa based on similar historic experiences. And despite ideological differences and challenges in understanding one another's context of that time, our youths were firmly on the same side, united by the universal call for non-discrimination and equal rights. Around the same time, as it was already told, Poland and South Africa, I mean, history elevated both Poland and South Africa from being a rather peripheral states with little global meaning into icons of change and hope. If you look for icons of the end of the 20th century, you'd naturally come up with Poland and South Africa laying new foundations for their states and societies. And this came with expectations and ambitions to live up to those promises that both of us repeatedly would be confronted with in later years. For Poland and South Africa, for Poland, South Africa has traditionally been seen as a priority partner country in Africa, major economic hub and a gateway into the broader region. Probably when thinking of the African continent today and prospects for further economic cooperation, South Africa would be the first to think of. Even though Poland is probably increasing its presence in West Africa currently, most dynamically. If you look at the annual addresses of the Polish foreign minister with guidelines for the foreign policy, when discussing Africa, it is only South Africa and Nigeria which are usually being explicitly named as the most prospective economic partners. In trade figures, it would be South Africa firmly first, then a huge gap, and then the rest of the countries of the continent. Maybe it's because South African business is visible in Poland, unlike most of other African states. Apart from what was already said, I mean, Redefined Properties made some significant investments in construction and is well recognized as a major foreign investor in Poland. In Warsaw, I was passing by construction of such shopping mall on my way to university for my PhD studies regularly. And Submiller used to own 3 major Polish breweries producing popular beer brands. And Mondi Group owns one of Poland's biggest packaging and industrial bags producer. It was one of its major European acquisitions in the 90s. And thanks to this South African investments, the level of odor that used to surround this factory reduced significantly. And so we didn't suffer anymore when passing nearby for family trips. If I was to advise South African business, which with their prospects in Poland, I would take advantage of the South African braai culture. So Polish people love to grill, but apparently you are far more advanced in that. And the amount of grilling assortment in supermarkets would definitely impress Polish customers. Maybe that changes with SPAR. Scientific cooperation, which was already discussed, is where a huge potential for cooperation lays. And, I mean, Polish scientists, notably Professor Janusz Kałużny, contributed, for example, to the creation and launch of the South African Large Telescope in 2005. And there is certainly more we can do to harness the potential of the former South African students who studied in Poland and academic staff who taught in South African universities. In research, I mean, we will talk to Saya later about cooperation in research. Lately, we are all facing uncertain times with the food crisis already felt in Africa and energy crisis looming in Europe. And we're pretty much on the same boat. Poland did a lot to keep the food products exports from Eastern Europe flowing. And a few weeks ago, the news of the cargo ship load full of coal coming from South Africa was being reported with excitement in the Polish news reports, as if it was a messenger bringing good news. Also a highly symbolic moment. Our president's recent visits to Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and Senegal fits into the same pattern. Like, we are diversifying our energy portfolio urgently and looking again into Africa for partnerships. But of course, energy is just one sector. I mean, solar batteries, electric vehicles would certainly be another one to look into. But new connections are also being made in culture and entertainment industries. Amapiano music is already making inroads into Polish, club music scene, and it also changes perspectives. And there are also common threats that we could work on together. Not just those global like climate change or geopolitical shifts, in which Africa and South Africa have a great chance of increasing their roles. Let me just refer to yesterday's remarks by President Biden supporting reform of the Security Council, but also this touching our day-to-day experiences, easiness with which fake news and disinformation spread, and challenges in preparing our populations to be able to navigate in chaotic infospheres is where we should be more often looking into one another for ideas, good practices, and lessons learned. I know some very good quality South African initiatives in this field, which I will be eager to explore more while staying in South Africa. Thank you very much for your attention. And
let's make a short change, and I invite Madam Director Sadropoulos to present virtually his remarks.
Hello, everybody. Again, Chief Director, nice to have you at the Institute, and I've already welcomed other colleagues. I think both Chief Director Mazibuko as well as the Ambassador have highlighted some of the points that I will be touching on, and indeed also Mr. Cherub. But as you'll probably see from the program, I take my presentation, I'm looking at exploring bilateral relations through the prism of how they can be launch pads, building blocks for helping us address key global challenges. So partnerships are built on these building blocks, and how we engage at every level of them, I think helps to explain and helps to strengthen also our cooperation at the global level. I think it's true to say, and I'm probably not overstating the fact, that what we have seen in the last 7 months in terms of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a defining moment for global politics. And I think it calls fundamentally, as you have indicated, all of you this morning, for a real reassessment of partnerships and alliances in advancing global public goods, in looking at institutional frameworks that allow us to create sustainable futures, and indeed the values that underpin these. If we look at our two countries, Poland has a much greater geographic proximity to the events unfolding in Ukraine at the moment. South Africa and the continent less so, but critically, the implications and the consequences are felt by all. They're felt by all very materially in terms of issues like food security, energy, financing, but they're also felt at a normative level in terms of what the direction of travel is around constructing a fairer, more democratic, rules-based international order. I think, Ambassador, you have highlighted the importance of multilateralism and effective multilateralism to both our countries. That has been very much the pillar of a fundamental pillar of South Africa's foreign policy since 1994. And I think it is, and I would argue the same for Africa. And Africa, while in terms of Poland's concentric circles of importance, is clearly slightly at a greater remove, and that really is an issue of geographic proximity more than anything, in the same way that we can also talk about where our primary locus of focus is in South Africa and in SADC. I think what we have seen is that the bilateral relations have to intersect very much with the multilateral. The current, I think, geopolitical moment carries great significance from both a political, a security, and an economic perspective for Africa and for Europe, and for Poland and South Africa specifically. And I think Africa is an important and increasingly important diplomatic actor in its own right, driven, I think, by key regional powers in the continent, in the same way that we can see that replicated in Europe, and certainly South Africa, Nigeria, I would argue Ethiopia, Kenya, Senegal. These are all important drivers of Africa's voice at the global level. So let me unpack that a little bit. I think on many levels, as you've already alluded to, Poland, the EU, South Africa / Africa share similar values, respect for democracy, for the rule of law, for good governance, the imperative of a functioning multilateral system. But we also recognize that the collective challenges we face require global cooperation, where there's a particular role to play, I think, in the current uncertain geopolitical environment. I think there is a very, very important role for mid-level powers and smaller states to play. But here is the critical issue, that we can't look at the global without looking at the bilateral. Partnerships at the global level are absolutely premised often on mutual respect, cooperation at the bilateral level, mutual benefit at the bilateral level. And I think what we have seen in the last 7 months in terms of the interactions and engagements between African states and other countries in the global south, and indeed the global north, is that when we look at developments, global developments in the world, we don't look at them in isolation from other relations. So bilateral, regional, global are all interconnected. And it is at the basic level of the bilateral sphere that trust, credibility, legitimacy is often fostered, that can become the launch pad then for cooperation at other levels. The second point I want to unpack, and I think I've already alluded to it, is the growing African agency, which is an important development that the world has to take into consideration. And I think often that is underestimated by various actors in the international scene. African states want to develop foreign policy autonomy. I think this is rooted very much in the way in which historically I think other parts of the world have engaged with them in terms of taking foreign policy positions. And I think it's important to have that understanding of autonomy and agency, which has become, which through, I think over the last 20 years with Africa's development of a series of institutions, most notably, of course, the African Union and its various agencies and architectures, whether it's governance, peace and security, and so on. The ability to project not often a united, but certainly a strong African voice. I mean, there are always going to be differences within the continent, in the same way that there are differences within Europe. I think that ability has become stronger. And so this means that the way in which African countries were viewed and engaged in the past also needs to be adjusted to reflect these new realities. I'm going to talk specifically about 3 or 4 areas which various speakers have touched on this morning in terms of bilateral relations that speak to both Polish and South African / African interests, and how these also can be vehicles for greater regional cooperation and therefore and also for global cooperation. The first and most fundamental is economics, because of course both regions and both countries have a direct interest in being able to create better welfare, greater wealth, prosperity for our citizens. And in that regard, trade and investment are critical. And certainly when we talk about trade in the African context, we think about the African Continental Free Trade Area. But the African Continental Free Trade Area is also fundamentally about investment. It is about creating in Africa the ability of African states to trade more among themselves, which means the creation of the creation of industries that add value to products. And that's about regional value chains. And I think these are areas where already there has been some presence of Polish actors in this regard. And I'm going to talk about one in particular, maybe 2, because I think they build off each other. The one is clearly agriculture, where there have been one of the most notable Polish companies, Ursus, has been playing an important role in terms of provision of farming equipment, and specifically tractors. I had the the real privilege of actually visiting them when I was in Poland a few years ago, and to see over the last few years how they have really made significant inroads into key African countries, particularly in Eastern Africa, and working together with whether it is with Ethiopia, Tanzania, Zambia, on the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector, I think, is one of the priority sectors within Africa, not only because we have such opportunities, but also this has become even more important in the context of the vulnerabilities that we have been exposed to on the continent as a result of the war in Ukraine. And so looking at how the agricultural sector in the context of Polish-African relations can become an area of focus of cooperation in terms of both investment, or particularly investment, which can then also lead to greater intra-African trade, I think is an important area. It's also important in the context of looking at it in terms of the SADC, of course, industrialization plan, where there are also other areas which I think are important. And this is where also Poland, I think, has made some, is a leader, is recognized as a leader in its field, relating to, I think Mr. Tserup alluded to it, e-vehicles, for example. I think Poland is one of the leaders in lithium-ion battery production. In the continent, in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we are looking at building a bigger automotive manufacturing market. There are key South African actors involved in that process. And clearly also SADC, Southern Africa, houses some of the most important minerals in this green transition. And what we want to see in this context of value add is the opportunity to beneficiate and to use those minerals in collaboration with other partners, in technological collaboration with other partners, being value added here in the continent to feed into the requirements, the industrial requirements of a new of the green technological transition. And so shifting from the internal combustion engine to e-vehicles and the minerals associated with it, I think Southern Africa is certainly positioning itself in that, as an important, potentially as an important hub for such development. Then let me, oops. I think just coming back to the issue of agriculture, a point that I omitted to mention is that I think with the war in Ukraine, increasingly at a bilateral level, many African countries are really thinking and already rolling out plans to boost local production. For example, some of these plans were being rolled out at the recent African ministers, finance ministers forum in Dakar, around creating opportunities for thousands of smallholding farmers to build soya or sunflower seeds cultivations. And again, this is very much an opportunity for collaboration, particularly around equipment, as I indicated. So this is also showing greater African agency. The last point I want to raise in terms of specific sectoral cooperation is that very much of the energy transition. That, after all, is the big elephant in the room in any discussion in international relations these days. Most African states clearly have a really small carbon footprint. So when we're talking about African states, we're talking about adaptation. But in the case of South Africa and Poland, for whom coal is also a very important element, I think this transition poses a major challenge. I think it's been recognized very much in Poland's foreign policy strategy, the importance of not compromising on energy security, an issue that has, I think, become even more relevant and pertinent in the last 7 months. And for us here in South Africa, we're also very much aware and sensitive to the challenges that are posed by trying to meet the targets we have set ourselves within South Africa, but also the global Paris Agreement targets. And one of the key vehicles, one of the key instruments for that is, of course, the Just Energy Transition Partnership, where the European Union as an entity is very actively involved. And that then is an area that I also want to touch on a little bit, because I think there is a significant opportunity for a country like Poland, which is an important regional player in Central and Eastern Europe, and within the European Union, given its size, given also its influence and agency that we have seen really build up since it joined the European Union. I think there is a greater opportunity for leveraging its position within the European Union for a greater voice and advocacy on African issues. I think I think the exit of the UK from the European Union has created a gap there, and I think building on the previous solidarity that you, Ambassador, and also Chief Director and Mr. Tserep have identified in terms of support for African liberation struggles, not only in South Africa. I think there is an important, another important theatre for engaging and becoming much more involved on African issues, not just at the bilateral level on Poland, South Africa, Poland, Nigeria, but also EU Africa. And of course, the particular experiences of your own countries in transition, both economic and political transition in the 1990s, is not only relevant, and where there are lessons, there are potential lessons to exchange with South Africa because of our own transformation, but I think there are also particular economic lessons, particularly not just political, that the continent can also draw value from, particularly through the conduit of EU-Africa deliberations. These, I think, are just some examples of areas where greater mutual cooperation, mutual understanding, mutual trust can then build on for other areas and other layers where perhaps the conversations might be a little bit more difficult. I think you, Ambassador, alluded to the points that, you know, we don't always have to agree on particular worldviews or particular perspectives. But what we should never give up is on the opportunities created by mutual respect and mutual trust to have some of the difficult conversations. And I know that in the Europe-Africa context, one of the difficult conversations is, of course, on issues of migration. But I think, and not least, of course, in South Africa, we have our own challenges around migration. And I think that is also something that we should not set to the side, but actually have frank conversations on. In conclusion then, because I've probably taken more time than I should have, I think we are living in turbulent times. Achieving Agenda 2030, achieving the Paris Agreement in the context of the African Union, achieving Agenda 2063 will really require significant collective action, which unfortunately is increasingly endangered because of the turn of global developments. So I think countries like Poland and South Africa that also act in some ways as leaders within their respective regions or among the leaders in their respective regions, I think have a particular responsibility to build understanding, to work together, to work on common issues together, to address global challenges, and therefore also to create a platform on issues where things might be a little bit more difficult to move forward, but where dialogue is essential if we're going to move forward at all. Let me leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. And we have about 20 minutes for questions and answers. Our suggestion is that we take one question from this room and the second question, and one question from the virtual reality. And I have seen the gentleman there.
Dzień dobry Państwu. My name is Rios Shanik, and when I heard about this event, I had to be here. I just happened to be visiting my family back home in Gqeberha, and I took the next flight over here to celebrate our two countries' bilateral relations. Poland is a very special place to me because since 2018, I've called Poland home. It's been my home away from home. And it's in Poland where I concluded my diplomatic studies, my diplomatic training at the European Academy of Diplomacy, and where I work as a youth representative at the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies. So I have to say, the Polish people have been very welcoming. It's been an incredible experience for me. So to you, Ambassador, on behalf of your country, I'd just like to say, bardzo dziękuję za wszystko. It's been an amazing experience. My question is for you, Pani Ambassadorze. I've seen firsthand, the influx of refugees coming in from Ukraine, many nationalities as well. I mean, from February to March, I've seen how Warszawa Centralna looks like. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. There's been refugees as far as the eye can see. So my question really is for you, Pani Ambassadorze, and maybe the Chief Director could come in as well. What can South Africa do, with Poland being on the front line? How can we work together to really, cease the violence in Poland and, sorry, not in Poland, in Ukraine, and to ensure that peace? What can we do together as partners to ensure that? Thank you very much. Dziękuję.
Okay, we're going to take one from the online room as well. Question to His Excellency the Ambassador. Following the most successful visits to the Parliament of Poland by the former chairperson of the NOCP and also former Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa and our current Minister of Defense in September 2016, and of the former Marshal of the Polish Senate to our Parliament in November 2017, how does His Excellency see the further deepening of enhanced and practical cooperation between our two national legislatures bilaterally and in international parliamentary fora for the next decade unfold?
Your Excellency, Ambassador Kanta, good afternoon. My name is Ishmael Mbetse, and I'm the advisor to the Chief Whip in the city of Johannesburg. Throughout history, politics have always led economics, and as today we commemorate 30 years of diplomatic relations between our two countries, we are at a time where the politics have started to change. Poland recently also saw a coalition government, and we talk of the trade that is there between our two countries and how moving forward there should be a change and an increase in the values of the trade that is there. But at a local level, municipal level, as well as provincial level, and as well as at national level, the dynamics of coalition governments are they're very hard to manage. But as Poland has experienced such a government, what sort of input and technical guidance can the government of Poland give to South Africa in managing that, such that we actually do see the increase that we'd like to see in the trade values that exist between our countries, and for the politics to actually lead the economics in such a way that that actually does become possible? Thank you.
Okay, I see Elizabeth is typing, so we will just allow her to respond as well. But the question is, what exactly is it that the African countries see as standing in the way of their independence in decision making?
So the first question related to the refugee crisis in Poland, which is of course a huge problem, not only for Poland but for many other Europe, especially European countries, but is a result of the Soviet Russian aggression on Ukraine. We have now about 3.1 million Ukrainian refugees living in Poland. Since the beginning of the aggression, now almost 7 million refugees from Ukraine crossed Polish border. It doesn't mean that all of them stay, of course, in Poland, but some of them went back to Ukraine, especially those living in the western part of Ukraine, because they were moved to the eastern part and they could come safely back home. But of course, it is a huge burden because most 93% of all the Ukrainian refugees are women with children. The men were not allowed to leave Ukraine because they had to join the army and they were needed in the country. And Poland has to provide for them health service, accommodation, and what is worth to underline is that we haven't created in Poland detention camps or refugee camps for the refugees. Most of the refugees were welcomed by the Polish families. What can we do together with South Africa about this? Well, of course, because of the distance, the number of forms of cooperation is very limited. But the main one I would underline is the cooperation on the international forums to end up the crisis or end up the war with Ukraine, because this is the only solution. We have some different views on this part, of course, because of our different geopolitical positions. And what we always say that Poland feels as being a part of this difficult situation, while most of other countries are just observers for the time being, because especially the food crisis will affect all parts of the world and will create a very difficult situation. So at the moment, what we can do together is to present similar standing at the international forums to put a pressure to end up this war. Second question was about parliamentary cooperation, and it referred to the visit to Poland by NCOP chairman, currently the defense minister, Mrs. Tandi Modise. She visited Poland in 2016, and it was a very successful visit, then reciprocated by the visit of the Polish chairman of the upper house of the Polish Parliament, Senate, Marszałek Karczewski, and then next visit of deputy chairman of the Senate, also in South Africa. All those visits were very successful, and we really do our best to continue those relations. I'm pleased also to say that a few months ago, on the initiative of the Polish parliamentarians, a group of friends, Poland, South Africa, was created in Polish Parliament. The group has constituted. They have already met with South African ambassador to Poland, and I believe that it will be another form of an impact to our relations. The third question was about technical input can Poland give to South Africa. I think that the most we could share our experience is the transformation, because we started, as I mentioned in my speech, we started the transformation almost at the same time. Communism in Poland collapsed in 2089 formally, and then we had a very two years of depression, and actually we started our growth in 1991 in South Africa after the collapse of apartheid in 1994, and there are so many similarities. We have huge experience, for example, in the privatization of our industry. There was very exceptional, on the world scale, mass privatization program where 500 companies were allocated into 15 national investment funds. And all citizens of Poland received for free a share in one of those 15 national investment funds. This is a very interesting example, and I could go more in the details, but we have no time for that. We have very successful experience in transforming our energy system. The discussions which are in South Africa now about dividing Eskom into the 3 legs, well, generation, distribution, and transfer of the energy. This is what we had done several years ago. I don't remember exactly, end of 1990s. It took some time. Then the other issues which are also hot in South Africa, and I remember from my activities, because I had my private corporate finance consulting firm, and we've done lots of privatization programs as an advisor to the minister and to the municipalities. The hot issue was, for example, to allow foreign investors to enter into the municipal services. At the very beginning, it seemed, for most people, it seemed that it's not possible that we let the French company SAW take 51% of the company in Gdańsk distributing water to all inhabitants of the town, and many more of this kind of examples. So I think that in the field of the transformation, very close to my heart is the economic transformation, but also transformation, social and political transformation. There are lots of similarities, and because we are very successful, I don't want to compare figures, but we are really very successful. We started with the level of GDP in 1991 about $55 billion US. Now we have about 700 billion US dollars, a huge growth. We had continuous GDP growth for almost 28 years, and we were second in the world after Australia, and together with China on the second position, sharing the length of the continuous growth. And over those years, the average GDP growth was over 4% on average every year. And what I sometimes say in South Africa is what I say just as a humor, but it's true, that the last load shedding in Poland was recorded at the end of Second World War, which is about 70 years ago. I can't remember because I'm not that old, but it is true. So if you have any more questions, I'm very open to share our experiences.
I've dropped it. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for that input. There was that question from Mr. Shanik. I wish I spoke fluent Polish like you do. Congratulations on just your development and just your exposure through partnership with Poland. I think the question that you asked about the refugees and the support that Poland has provided to the Ukraine and how South Africa can work together with Poland to support the end of the war in Ukraine. You know, for South Africa, calling for peace is, you know, is something that really is born from our own experience of conflict, not just in terms of our own history of experience of conflict, but conflict in the region. And we believe that it's true even now, that building a coalition for peace and dialogue is a better way than building up of arms. We think that because Poland is so close to the line of fire, you know, we are here to, you know, to engage, but also to assist if there's areas where you think we can assist in building that coalition for peace and more people to talk about it. The impact of the war, as much as we are not directly next to the war, is felt here in South Africa. The food, the energy price hikes, it's been really difficult, and it's not something that we need or want. So we believe that working with Poland and like-minded countries at the multilateral level to really get the United Nations Security Council to do its work of building peace, but also bringing the United Nations Secretary General at the center of peacemaking is where we will go right. When the refugee crisis was happening and the war was taking place, I literally had a week in this particular role, and I phoned the ambassador. He had no clue who I was. We had our own students who were coming out of the Ukraine in the middle of winter, and the level of support that they got as they just crossed the border into Poland. I'd really like to thank you, Ambassador, for that support. They were just getting food, getting SIM cards to be able to call home and indicate that, you know, they're well. And so Poland has done a lot, and we thank you so much for that. In terms of, there was just one issue around a virtual question on independence decision-making in Africa. I think that it's difficult to have an independent voice when you are dependent for your survival, when you're dependent in terms of your economy. So I think for Africans to be able to make independent decisions is for them to support their own programs. We have Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, with its 7 aspirations of where we want to go. And I think the more we focus on bringing Africans together, focus on intra-Africa trade, ensuring that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area grows and we have more intra-Africa trade and development, we will get far. At the moment, it's easier to get to Europe than it is to get to Mali from South Africa. And Africans will never, ever be able to be independent and make independent decisions if we're still reliant on a lot of things from outside of the continent. So I believe that growing our own economies through cooperation within ourselves and engaging partners like Poland, like the EU, to support Africa's agenda. I think that's where we will be able to go further, especially also including opportunities for young people and creating space for women and young people in decision-making. We'll be able to make different decisions. Thank you.
Madam Director, and two more questions. I have seen you, sir, and the last, you, sir.
I'm not sure who will take it later.
Thank you, sir. My name is Matthew Mponzo. I'm the Secretary General of the National Cooperative Association of South Africa. Mine is just very short. I just want to understand, because to my knowledge, I don't know of any kind of a cooperation movement to movement from South Africa to and Poland. I just want to know, how can the ambassador and the chief director facilitate, or they co-facilitate that kind of movement to movement cooperation, as well as sector to sector organizations, collaboration and cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be back.
Thank you to Saya for organizing this magnificent event, and to the ambassador, the chief director, and the chairperson. My question is, I'm Skungo Jebi, I'm a researcher in the public policy. My question relates to both countries' rich histories and the cultural diversity. I'm looking at the plenary perspective in our country and in other African states, whereby the district development models did not include culture as an economic driver. Even the plenary, culture is not there. Well, yet we can get a lot out of that resource that is untapped for as a commodity, because culture contributes a lot of incentives into our GDP stream. Yet, even at the municipality levels, then you don't see anything that mentions culture, no different aspects of the cultures. No, for instance, we have got rich histories dating back to the First and the Second World War, especially in the Middle Europe and in our country. We've got the heroes, unsung heroes in the communities, where we have the oral histories that can contribute to the tourism. Yet we don't tap in from that resource. Only our focus is in a monolingual aspect. You know, is Poland do the same, or using culture as one of the models of economic drivers? Because we're failed dismally in Africa to tap from that aspect. Yet we have now an erasure of African archives in our histories. And sorry, I'm not trying to be controversial, sorry.
There's no question, so I'll, yeah.
Thank you. All right, I was quite interested to see how this discussion ended up covering refugees, and I must congratulate you on your Polish. For those who don't know me, I'm Stefan Szewczuk, and I'm president of the Polish Association of Siberian Deportees in Africa. And I was quite surprised to note that both the ambassador and the chief director made reference to the 500 Polish orphans in Oudtshoorn. Both of my parents are two of those children. Now, I think the question arose in terms of what can South Africa do to help refugees, not only Ukrainians. And I want to put out the offer there that I'd like to end up with discussions about how to, let's say, deal with refugees, because we've been there, done that. We have annual conferences, the South Africa Poland heritage conferences, and the Polish embassy, they support us financially. And in one conference, one of the recommendations that came out is, can we not help refugees in some way or the other? There's a huge refugee problem in South Africa. Refugees are flocking to South Africa. So I'm putting that offer out there. I'm not too sure who will respond to that, but okay, that offer is out there. Now, secondly, all right, I spent my career at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Pretoria, that's the CSIR. Spent my life as a researcher in science, technology, and engineering. Many years ago, and Ambassador, before your time, myself and another colleague, we ended up in discussions with the Polish embassy, looking at, okay, how can we get science and technology cooperation going between South Africa and Poland? I think what came through, it was being done within a vacuum. There was, I think there is some kind of agreement. The question I'm wanting to ask is, what's the think in terms of some kind of bilateral agreement in terms of science and technology between Poland and South Africa? I'm very much pro that you have to put technology in place for development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo. My name is Mary Jane Tyler Chimuka. I am working at Agricultural Research Council, but I studied in Poland and I'm a Polish product. And yeah, mówię po polsku. Studiowałam w Warszawie, Uniwersytet. I just want to add to that, my colleague Leonard Friend said here. I think it would be nice for Poland. I would love to give back to Poland or collaborate. That there should be, you know, I'm just giving an example, and the executive of SAP said something about research, and clearly agriculture is one of those, and energy. I happen to work with both of them, but there must be a serious starting of collaboration and introduction of researchers, universities. I'm giving an example of Sweden. What they do, they will have a visitation where the scientists sit and they talk of topics and they know each other. I studied in Warsaw, but I changed the topic. I would love to see other universities. I would love to see other researchers. So a platform must be opened by the Pani Ambassador, that we can start to, in time, even before there can be a call of collaboration, that we start to prepare the proposals. It takes time. A good proposal should be at least 6 months. So let's talk with counterparts, identify research and university. I'm also working, I'm appointed here at the university research, and it would be a good platform, as he said. Thank you very much.
Okay, if I can maybe add something. I'm happy to see a colleague from who went through the European Academy of Diplomacy, which I am in close relations with. I used to teach in some of the courses. Maybe we've met actually by accident. But the question on how to use diversity in tourism and cultural diversity, what we can see in Poland now is an increasing trend in going into niche themes by localities, by regions, and promoting the kind of unique cultural features that certain locality have in order to provide something different for a visitor. And I think the tourist councils in central regions are also expanding more and more into looking for global partnerships. I know. Say Wielkopolskie Council of Tourism is for example providing, doing such in-courses into Africa to look for partnerships and to exchange good practices. So it is something we're also looking for, to explore more of our diversity to be seen. To offer something new for the visitors, and this is certainly a space where exchange could be done. But when I mentioned popular music, it is something that is already happening. For example, we have collaborations between artists which are taking place. One of the most popular Polish rappers we're doing music together with artists from Madagascar, for example. And there are festivals which were when Kuduro from Angola was a big thing. We had Kuduro artists performing Poland, and this is a trend that we are looking for new cultural trends across the world, and there is an increasing audience for that, for something which is unique, which reflects diversity of places. So I see a huge potential in this area.
And what I can assure you that it's happening much more than we see. There were visits of South African groups in the festivals in Gdynia, for example, in the summertime, and several other visits. They are not publicized so much because they are not such big events like Miss Supranational, which was very popular, and both in Poland and South Africa. But it happens a lot, and we, as I said, we value enormously the cultural diversity and culture as a driver of improved development of the relations. First question was about movement for businesses. If I understood well, if it's an issue of the movement of businessmen, I don't see any problem in it. Of course, there is a visa requirement for South African citizens going to Poland, but there are no problems if anybody has justified task to go to Poland. There's not a problem for established businesses. There are long-term visas for 2 years or so, and there are quite many South African businessmen working in Poland and going very often to Poland. Especially the names of some companies were mentioned: Redefined Properties, Growth Point, huge investors on the Polish market. I've mentioned, I didn't say the names, but they are the largest foreign investors in the property market in Poland, and we issue lots of visas for their employees to going to Poland. So I don't see it. It's not as easy as to take a passport and fly to Poland tomorrow, but that is not a problem. If there is such a requirement, we can cope with it. The refugees Stefan mentioned, so I think we've said about the refugees, all or nothing, because the subject is so broad that we could talk about this for the whole day, I suppose. And the technology cooperation. Well, our role is to create frameworks, and it's like making incentives for the business. I have quite a lot of experience of it, serving as a British honorary consul in Poland. One of our tasks for 22 years. So one of our tasks was to promote and facilitate businesses. And from my experience, the first point is that if there is no need coming down, up, I mean from companies, from businessmen, then you can't do much. We can create framework, and we are very open if we get information that there is such a problem, that we can do something to it. We are very happy to do, but it's very difficult to convince business people to invest or to make businesses with other countries. Also, the trade is doing very well, and I was recently surprised when I learned that Poland became the biggest supplier of wheat to South Africa in this year, and also the rapid growth of export from South Africa of the coal. For the first 6 months, we imported over 600,000 tons of of coal to South Africa, and there are negotiations aiming at over 3 million export of coal to Poland because of this energy problems we had connected with the Russian invasion. So if you have any other ideas about how we can help to facilitate, improve the channels of transfer of the technologies between universities, it's the same situation as with the businesses. The universities and the scientists themselves, they must feel interest and they must see benefits of their cooperations. Otherwise, it's very difficult to convince. Also, we would be very happy to do it if we get such information that we can do something.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question, Mr. Bonzo, on the people-to-people cooperation and movements. I think from our side, people-to-people cooperation sustain a relationship. So the more our people get in touch with each other and they cooperate, the better. Our mission in Warsaw has programs to engage Polish entities and even cultural and people entities. So if there's a specific line of interaction that you think is missing, we'd be happy to engage with you and hear what you think from your side. But as a general principle, we believe in people-to-people cooperation. And I think it's tied to what Mr. Jeffrey spoke about in terms of the history, rich history of cultural adversity. I was reading just on Polish history that Poland as a country has a large history of diversity that predates previously, not this century or the previous century, other centuries, you know, and the different history as in terms of different wars that happened diluted some of the cultural diversity of Poland, but they do have that history, you know, but I think it can only happen when, for instance, in our own country, we have cultural tourism. We are trying to increase tourism to townships as an opportunity, and people only visit spaces where they can learn. You know, when you travel to a country, you don't travel to see the same thing that you see at home. You travel to see some type of diversity, and that's why you know, our Department of Tourism is working hard to put more investment into tourism, and especially cultural tourism and township tourism. The challenge that I think we forget is the impact of COVID on a lot of the things that were happening. If you recall, COVID stopped any movement. You know, there was no movement, there was no interaction. So we're literally almost starting from the beginning, you know, and I think that we have opportunities to, you know, even promote the way we promote tourism into South Africa from Poland, as our mission is there. We need to expose more of what South Africa's cultural diversity is about. And also, because of a country that supported our liberation struggle, you know, talk about more of a liberation tourism, you know, where are our heroes' acres and all those type of things where we create that movement even beyond South Africa's borders. We had countries that supported their liberation movements. And, you know, how does South Africa, for instance, partner with Tanzania in the context of Africa Agenda 2063 to create more tourism both to South Africa and to Tanzania, but trailing how our liberation movement or our struggle stalwarts lived and what it is that they did. You know, we always hear about the SOMAFCO. Where is it? How do South Africans? Exactly, Morogoro, all those, you know, even for South Africans themselves, you know. So I think it's an important conversation to have, and an important area for us to develop. And the issues around, thank you, Samuel, about CSR research, cooperation within science and technology. Our own Department of Science and Innovation has seen the area of astronomy as one of the key areas for collaborating with Poland, as well as engaging with academies of research to have mutual cooperation with those academies. And they are literally looking for conversations like this as we restart after this 2-year heinous of the COVID breakdown. So I really believe that there will be more momentum in most areas of our relations. Thank you so much for the input here.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. To some more information, before COVID, we are service there was a plan to open an air connection between Warsaw and Johannesburg. But I believe that in this moment after COVID, with the increment of Polish tourism, there's a serious number of Polish tourism, it's the time to come back to this idea, because a direct flight from Warsaw to Johannesburg opened the gates not only to South Africa, but opened the gates to all the countries. So for in this moment, Johannesburg is a hub for all the travelers to Poland, and Warsaw is also a hub for travel from to South Africa. The second question, the question of cooperation of technology, I have the pleasure to announce that 27 next week there was a virtual meeting between our two ministers of higher education about this question, and we are very close to sign an agreement about our cooperation between the universities on the area of technology and of the area of scientific cooperation. There is several points that, of course, of common interest, not only astronomy but also physics, also mathematics, also this kind of the priority, the priority for the exact science. So we believe that, of course, like has stressed Madam Director, COVID was a terrible experience in all the aspects, but we believe that we can to come back to the older path and reconstruct what was not possible to finish with COVID. And for finish our seminar, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Madam Neuma Grobelar, Director of Research of SAIA. Please, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Don't worry, please take a seat. I'm going to be very brief because I recognize that I'm standing between you and lunch. We're a little bit over time, but it's actually really an honor to make the closing remarks. I think at this fascinating discussion celebrating 30 years of relations between South Africa and Poland, there's a standout phrase that sort of jumped out at me when I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to try and summarize every single presentation, but I want to reflect, and it comes from Mr. Cherub. He said these two countries represented icons of change and hope. And the question is, have we lived up to the expectations? And I think if we look to the future, what we've heard this afternoon is the enormous potential, actually, in this relationship. We've got very different histories, complex histories. We're finding ourselves in a period of global turbulence, words that Elizabeth used. And we have the potential here both to explore how we can build mutual trust and respect between our two countries, because that is so incredibly necessary for what we need to do at the global level. And I think just to emphasize again, sort of building a coalition of peace in a period of enormous turbulence and insecurity is actually the best thing that we can do for ourselves and for the world. So I think it's, I think with those few words, I just want to say thank you very much to our speakers. I'll start with in the virtual space, Elizabeth, who couldn't be here with us, but I see listened very carefully to the conversation. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much, Mr. Cherub from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Really appreciate it. To our moderator, Mr. Jaroslav Spira, who kept us all honest and asked all the questions, but then really also a very, very warm thanks to Ms. Phumzile Masibuku. I can just imagine how terrifying it must have been 1 week into the job to take care of our students. This is surely a frightening thought, and therefore hence the support also from the Polish Embassy. So fantastic. So thank you very much, Your Excellency, for spending the time with us. I think just in terms of the questions that we heard this afternoon, there is such a potential for cooperation and for learning. And I hope the conversation will continue over lunch, and I hope that we will welcome you soon here again at SAIA. So thank you very much. And thank you also to our online participants. Really appreciate it.
Right over. Yeah, yes, yes.